Passamos agora para o segundo momento Tendências da Arena Laranja, com o painel Avançando as Fronteiras da Ciência e Tecnologia, Inovações Transformacionais. Para apresentá-lo, é com satisfação que chamamos ao palco Howard Charney, vice-presidente da Cisco Systems. Welcome, Mr. Charney.
So we're going to talk this afternoon about advancing the frontiers of science and technology. And you have to understand something. I've spent my entire career in Silicon Valley advancing the frontiers of science and technology. And there are certain things that you must appreciate if you're going to create innovation. Now, what's interesting is that innovation comes from disruption. Markets get disrupted, businesses get to be uncomfortable. And what this slide is about is that business is going to change greatly. So in the upper right, you see the Brazilian equivalent to the Khan Academy, or the Brazilian website, which stands for the principle of the online delivery of content. And in the lower right, autonomous vehicles. We'll talk a little more about them a little bit later. Then you see delivery of pharmaceuticals via drones. But what I like a lot about this slide is the upper left-hand corner. And in the upper left-hand corner, there's a young girl, and she lost her arm. And so what they did was they used a 3D printer to create a prosthetic limb for this young girl. Now, it turns out that to get a prosthetic limb takes months by the old technology, months and months, and it costs tens of thousands of dollars. They created this prosthetic limb for this young girl overnight at a cost of about $75 US. That's disruption. Now, in the lower left, you see a piece of a highway or a road. That's disruption. And what that is about is these Scandinavians who decided, you know, we build lots of roads here in Scandinavia. Why don't we use these roads to deliver and create electricity? So that is a piece of roadway that creates electricity via solar energy. That is disruption. Now, one of the people that I like to quote a lot is Ray Kurzweil, and Ray Kurzweil happens to work for Google. And Ray Kurzweil says that during this century, technological change is going to be exponential. We will not experience 100 years of change. We will not experience 1,000 years of change. More likely, we will experience 20,000 years of progress in this century. And so, to paraphrase Mr. Kurzweil, this is going to be a period of a great deal of uncomfortableness. What's also true is that there are these two professors at MIT, Brynjolfsson and McAfee, and Brynjolfsson and McAfee also say that during this century we will achieve exponential change in the world around us. Now, this is not actually a new concept. Carlota Perez, in her seminal work on technology revolutions and financial capital, she actually says that we are in the fifth major technology revolution of modern times, beginning with Arkwright's mill in the 1770s. And today, we are in that fifth major technology revolution, and that major technology revolution is the age of IT and the internet. And if she's right, then we are about halfway to, say, two-thirds of the way through this technological revolution, and we still have about 10 to 15 years left in the age of IT and the internet. And so the question becomes, will technology leave humans behind? And we're going to talk a little more about this later. And so in about 2005, Kurzweil wrote this book called When the Singularity is Near. And what he posited was that there will come a time when the personal computer is as powerful as the human brain. And when that occurs, basically the role of human beings on this planet changes. It changes forever. Now, in a subsequent interview with Kurzweil, he actually said that this would occur between 2029 and 2034. And so the pace of change will become so rapid and so deep that life on this planet will be forever altered. And so let's back up and try to take a look at what are some of the mega trends that exist today. And we'll take each of these in order. First is mobility. I come from the world where everything was wired, but you know what? That's old. Nothing is wired anymore. Everything must be mobile. Everything is mobile, and it collects a lot of data, and there are sensors everywhere. And in order for this world to function, you have to have security. Because if you don't have security, the entire system collapses. It is completely useless. We're going to come back to security a little bit later. So the first mega trend is mobility. The second mega trend is the cloud. And people say to me, well, why are we moving everything to the cloud? The answer is severalfold. One is because it is economically persuasive. We can do operations in the cloud much more inexpensively than you can do it on your laptop or your personal computer or your tablet or your phone. We can do it more inexpensively. Secondly, we can back it up. How many of you back up your computers regularly? Most people do not. And so we do it in the cloud because it's more secure from a backup standpoint. And the third is actually security. We can secure the cloud better than you can secure your individual tablet or your individual phone or your individual computer. So the cloud is a big deal. And then we have the Internet of Things. This is a major trend. My company has invested a great deal in the Internet of Things, and we know that the Internet of Things is going to connect your intelligent thermostat to some place in the cloud. And we know that the Internet of Things is going to connect your automobile to the cloud. But these two examples are kind of interesting. The one on the left is from the University of California at San Diego, and they created a patch, an intelligent patch, which you would wear on your arm, and it would monitor your blood pressure, and it would monitor your glucose levels, and would monitor your temperature, and it would monitor, etc. And it would take that information, it would send it to your smartphone, and from your smartphone, it would go out over the web. And so what this would allow is much, much better health monitoring for all of us. Today we get health intervention when we get sick, but wouldn't it be better if you had these measurements real time? The second thing that's kind of interesting is the example on the right. That's Circadia Health. And Circadia Health, it turns out, built a system to detect breast cancer. And they did it by this bra that a woman would wear, and it would detect temperature variations in the human breast. And so it turns out that mammography or X-ray detection is very expensive, and it has a lot of false positives. But the promise of this technology, this IoT technology, is that it would be totally non-invasive and a much higher level of efficacy. So the Internet of Things is all about instrumenting our world, and we are never going backwards, we are only going forward, and this is what our world will be like. These are just a couple of examples. And then we talk a lot about big data. And so we speak about big data, and we talk about getting a closer relationship with your customers, and we talk about collecting data, say, for the health of your automobile or where your children might be playing today. This one is a little bit different. This example from big data is interesting because it has to do with saving the lives of premature infants. And so the woman on the right is Carolyn McGregor. And she's at the University of Ontario, and she discovered something that nobody else had known about previously. It turns out that they collect a lot of data in a premature infant ward, but most of the data gets thrown away until a baby gets sick. And until that child gets sick, nobody looks at the information. Well, she determined that the heart rate of a healthy infant is actually slightly irregular. But when that child is going to become ill, the heart rate becomes uncannily regular. Now, this is amazing. Imagine if you could administer antibiotics to a child before it got sick. So we're not talking now about just collecting data on the health of my automobile engine. We're talking about saving a child's life. And so when we talk about big data and big insights, we're talking about things like monitoring health, but we're talking about saving lives, and that's why we do it. So the future, though, you should understand, goes way beyond this. It goes way beyond the cloud, and it goes way beyond mobility, and it goes way beyond simple big data. It goes to machine learning, and it goes to artificial intelligence, and it goes to robotics and the human-machine interface, and it goes into augmented and virtual reality. And if you're looking for some place to start a business, maybe in here is one of them. So let's talk a little about machine learning. So these 5 people that you see on this slide are part of a startup in Silicon Valley. And what is the nature of this startup? So we all of us have this problem in the world. The problem is called fake news, lies that are published every single day by the news media. But you don't know that. You can't tell that what they're publishing may not be the truth. Plus, there's Facebook and there are Google, and they turn out to be primary mechanisms for the distribution of news. And so how do you know if something that appears in the news is the truth? You don't. So the way that Facebook decided to solve this problem was to hire 3,000 people to check the facts. Well, that doesn't work. It doesn't work for several reasons. One is it doesn't scale, and 2 is that people are by definition biased. But these people are going to use machine learning and artificial intelligence to determine whether the news is true or the news is fake. It's all done by machines, and the machines learn. And I don't have the time to explain to you how they do it, but it's amazing. Machines tell you whether the news is true or whether it's fake. This is also a pretty interesting example. So this example does come from Facebook. So Facebook created these 2 bots. What's a bot? A bot's a machine. And they created these 2 bots, and you can see on the slide, one bot is called Bob, and the other bot is called Alice. And what they did was they created these 2 bots, and they trained these bots so that they could negotiate a contract. They could purchase a product. They could go out on the web and buy something. Well, people do that today. But they wanted to see if they could train a bot to become, say, a purchasing agent. And they did. But here's the problem. These bots developed their own language to communicate with each other, and a language that the programmers did not understand. And they developed behavior that was very unusual. They learned how to feign interest in some product or service so that they would get a lower price. They began to emulate human behavior. And it got to be kind of scary. And so Facebook terminated the experiment. But it stands for the principle that machines can mimic artificially the intelligence of human beings. And this is a really big deal in our world today. Now, for those of you who think that the human-machine interface has gotten as sophisticated as it is ever going to get, you would be wrong. And the way that you and I interact with, say, these devices is we swipe. We hit a button or we swipe. That is so 20th century. But in the 21st century, the way we're going to do this is with your brain. There'll be no more swiping. And so the man on the left who is drinking from a bottle of water, he is lifting his arm with only his thoughts. You got that? There's no swiping. There's no hitting buttons. He is operating his prosthetic limb with only his thoughts. That's amazing. Now get this one. You see the guy on the right? He's in Germany. And he's instrumented with a bunch of sensors. He is controlling the levers of a pinball machine using only his thoughts. Do you understand what I just said? There's no buttons. He's controlling the levers with his mind. So, in the future, the human-machine interface is going to change greatly, and it's going to evolve in ways that are absolutely astounding and amazing. And here's one that's also kind of interesting. It comes from the world of augmented reality. And so this one comes from Norway. So when I look at a rock, what do I see? I see a rock. It doesn't mean anything to me. But when geologists look at a rock, what do they see? That's the problem. The problem is the geologists see something different than what you and I see because they're trained. So the geologists and the scientists at the University of Science and Technology in Trondheim in Norway, they said, you know, if we could put on some kind of augmented reality glasses and you could look at the rock through the glasses, maybe we could use software to teach people what it is that they're seeing. And that's what they did. And so, take a look. What the man is drawing on the rock, but it's all in virtual reality. He's putting 2 lines on the rock, and then you see in the lower part of the diagram, that is what the computer is generating to show the student what it is he is looking at. He's not really looking at a rock. He's looking at something which was formed over millions and millions of years. And so, this is the promise of augmented reality. The promise of augmented reality is what you see is not what you get. What you see is something the computer generates, and it's an experience. It's a wondrous experience, much, much different than just sitting in a classroom and having a professor teach to you. Much different. So the question now becomes, is tomorrow a utopia or is it a dystopia? So what's a utopia is something which is wonderful, and a dystopia is something which is horrible and you wish it never happened. And so that's a very interesting question. And some people say, you know, when 2029 or 2034 comes around and the personal computer is as powerful as the human brain, do humans have a place in this world anymore? What do humans do? Is it really true that the factory of the future is dark? There are no lights on. There's no lights. You know what? There's no people. The factory is just robots, and the robots move, and there's no human beings. Is that what the world of tomorrow is really about? No, that's not what the world of tomorrow is really about. And so there is this famous management guru who said, you know, the factory of the future will have only 2 employees, a man and his dog. The man will be there to feed the dog, and the dog will be there to keep the man from touching the equipment. Now that was Warren Bennis' way of saying, no. The factory of the future will not have only 2 people. That's silly. And so what this is about is we're always going to have people. And people are going to contribute in wondrous ways, and they're going to contribute in ways that we can't even know today. But we do know certain things, and we know that the human being must be a part of this future, or else all of us can just go home and end it all today. So the world of tomorrow will be different. So what do we do? What do all of us do to prepare for the world of tomorrow? Well, so let me tell you something. The great inventions, I've been a part of some of the great inventions that you all take for granted, and it was kind of exciting. But you know that the world is built on building blocks. And what came before works as an antecedent. It works as a foundation of what happens tomorrow. The world always gets smarter, and nothing ever gets thrown away. So in the case of automotive vehicles, we developed a lot of technology. We developed paved roads. We developed rubber tires. We developed safety glass. We developed LEDs and LCDs and engine control units. We developed all this technology. And do we throw this technology away just because we create autonomous vehicles? No. it all gets subsumed and used to make those autonomous vehicles. And nobody knows when we'll have autonomous vehicles, but we will. But what you need to understand is that it builds on these pillars of what came before. And so the idea of an autonomous vehicle didn't just spring from the head of somebody at Uber or somebody at Google or somebody at Ford. It doesn't happen that way. It happens because we have expertise in all these other technologies, and then one day somebody says, you know, the automobile could sort of drive itself. You know, that's actually possible. And they're right. So the idea of innovation springing from the head of Zeus is a mistake. It doesn't happen that way. It actually happens because of a lot of perspiration and a lot of intuition and a lot of hard work. And the same is also true for the information and the internet age. We didn't just create an application called eBay, or an application called Google, or an application called Oracle. That didn't just spring from somebody's head. What we had to do was we had to create the internet protocol in the 1970s, actually 60s. We had to create some very high-density silicon. We had to create switching technology and middleware. We had to create cloud computing. We had to create data centers. And so the moral of the story is that wondrous things happen, but they can't happen unless you get expertise in all the other areas. Because one of the things we've learned is that the way you get to tomorrow is by learning everything that came before. It's sort of an admission to the club. You cannot just do it. You've got to become expert in the other technologies. But that's okay. It just takes a long time. And so the question about the future, or basically the question is, what does the future building blocks, what do they look like? And the answer is, they involve a great deal of investment in R&D. We spend, I think the number is about $6 billion, it might be more, in R&D every year. The future relies on public and private partnerships. You know, nothing gets done, basically, without a partnership between the public sector and the private sector. Do you think autonomous vehicles will just go out on the road and drive themselves? No. The public sector is going to have to change the laws in order to allow that to happen. And it involves infrastructure investment. Do you think that the autonomous vehicle is just going to go out on the road and drive itself? No, we're going to have to upgrade the infrastructure. And it's going to involve a great deal of education and training, new public policies. It involves standardization. Do you think that the autonomous vehicle is going to just drive itself without standards? Here's one for you. Suppose the autonomous vehicle comes around a corner, and it's a Toyota. And there's a truck that's stopped because it has a flat tire. The Toyota stops. But if that vehicle is manufactured by General Motors, it doesn't stop. It goes right into the back of the truck. That's not acceptable. How do we stop that from happening? Standards. Standardization. So we need standards. We need integrity. We need trust. And we need security. And we need privacy. And so the future, the building blocks for the future are all these things. And what does it create? Well, it creates accelerated disruption. It creates that 3D printed arm that young woman, that young girl had in the first slide. It creates accelerated innovation. And what it does in the end is it improves human potential. And so the world of tomorrow is about a great deal of investment, and the hope, the promise is that our world is a better world. Now, I don't want you to think that we're going to do this without a bunch of challenges. There are many challenges. One of them is complexity. Human beings love to create complexity. And you might say, well, why do we do that? We do that for the power. When you have a database, and the database is very complex, and you don't share that data with somebody else, that gives you power. It gives you power over them, because I have the data and you don't. That's bad. And so the world of tomorrow needs to deal with the fact that we collect lots of data, but we don't share it. And it is in the sharing of the information that wondrous things happen, like Carolyn McGregor saving a baby's life because she was able to figure out that the heart rate was different for that baby versus that baby. The second thing that the that is a technology challenge is we have to be able to unlock the data. We collect so many gigabytes of data every single day, and the autonomous vehicle will collect even more. Airplanes that fly through the sky collect so many terabytes in a 30-minute flight. It's unbelievable. Well, the trick is to be able to unlock that intelligence, and the way we unlock that intelligence is via mathematics. And so you can't do this unless you're competent in mathematics, in software, in programming, in heuristics. That's what this world is going to become. This world is going to become very dependent on those which are able to unlock the intelligence in all those ones and zeros. And that's almost magic, but it isn't really magic, but it looks like magic when you're not a technologist. And lastly, our biggest challenge is security. Systems which can be hacked are sick. They are ill. They are broken. If you can hack a system, it is terrible. The information which is stored there is vulnerable. And so the world of tomorrow has this big problem, and the big problem is, how do we secure all this information? So those of you who think that maybe there's some kind of contribution you could make in the realm of innovation, a new company, and it's in security, you probably are right. Now we Cisco just spent thousands and thousands of person years, developing some new security software. So it turns out that when bits go across the internet, they are all encrypted. Nobody would be stupid enough to send information over the internet which was not encrypted. Well, encrypted data streams are opaque. You cannot tell anything about an encrypted data stream. It is you cannot understand it. It's not understandable. But we just figured out a way to unlock in an encrypted data stream if there's malware present. Malware is ugly software, viruses, Trojans. And so we just had this major breakthrough. And this is a really big deal. And so by breakthroughs like that, the future of tomorrow is a little bit more secure. Just a little bit. So let me just leave you with this thought. And it's a thought from the British poet Robert Browning. And Robert Browning said that human beings have the ability to dream. And we can dream about a future which does not exist, and we can make it exist. And that is what separates us from the animals. Or the way that Robert Browning said it was, a man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for? And what he was trying to say is that our job is to dream about a world that doesn't exist, and then to make it exist. And that's almost heavenly, and that's almost wondrous in and of itself. And that's kind of the challenge that I leave you with, is what does that world of tomorrow look like, and how can I dream about it and make it exist? Thank you.